Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to HighIntensityBusiness.com, the podcast where we discuss high-intensity strength training and provide you with the tools, the tactics, and the strategies to grow your strength training business. This is episode 331, and today I thought I would give you an update on my training, my workouts, diet and body composition, managing the stresses of fatherhood and running multiple businesses. And then from all that, try and give you some takeaways, some tips that I have uncovered to help get me through stressful periods of my life and try and maintain some semblance of good health and performance, and pass this over to you and see if they might be helpful to you as well. So let's talk about the training first. I really want to get into the details of this because I think some of you enjoy learning about this stuff. And so I would say that my latest training regimen has really been heavily influenced by the podcast series I did with both Dr. James Fisher and Luke Carlson, where we talked about volume and programming and all sorts of things about workout design. And that was over a 3-part series. And the links to that will be in the show notes to this episode over at 331. And I decided to do an upper lower body split. I found that for me personally, trying to do a full body workout that's high volume, so over 10 exercises, for me, I found particularly challenging at this point in my life. I just find that I struggle to really bring the intensity and to train all the movements to muscular failure. And I find that if I consolidate workouts down into a split type routine, that I can bring more intensity to the workout and to the specific exercises. So I've been doing an upper and lower body split. And I should also say that this has also been partly influenced by, as I said, by the podcast series with James and Luke, specifically around the potential value in additional volume and direct muscle stimulation. So making sure that I'm not just using multi-joint movements, but I am getting at muscles directly through a lot of single joint movements as well. So it's an upper lower body split. Workout A starts off with a time static contraction neck lateral movement. So this is 90 seconds with the first 30 seconds at 50% effort. So I'm actually using my own hand and pushing it against the side of my head, and at the same time pushing my head against the palm of my hand. And then for the second 30 seconds, I'm doing a 75% contraction. And then for the final 30 seconds of that 90, I am pushing as hard as I possibly can and really training the muscles at the side of the neck. And then I repeat that onto the other side. Then I go into a Med-X chest press, horizontal grip at a 210 cadence. Then a Med-X pull down with a supinated grip for a 210 cadence. Then Med-X overhead press front grip. If I don't mention the cadence, it's typically a 2-4 or something similar. Med-X seated row, dumbbell bicep curl in a split stance. So double bicep curl, dumbbell tricep extensions, or some people call that a French press or a skull crusher. So that's lying on a mat. And then time static contraction, external rotation with a resistance band for my right shoulder. So that's kind of rehabilitative for my right shoulder. And that's that's time static contraction. So that's not with a band. That's typically because I forget the band and I end up just pushing my fist against a wall. And that actually works quite well and leaves me with quite a nice sensation in the shoulder, funnily enough. And I typically do that over either 60 or 90 seconds, as I described earlier with the neck. And then I usually finish off with time static contraction grip. And I use Captains of Crush grippers to do that. And I use a typically a 60-second protocol for that as well. So that's workout A. So you've got, how many is that? 9 exercises, all for the upper body. And then workout B is time static contraction, neck extension, and flexion. Again, usually done with 90 seconds, although I always struggle to do time static contraction neck flexion for 90, so I tend to do 60. I just find it quite uncomfortable. And obviously, I would love to have a 4-way neck machine. So this is really my interim solution until we get something like that. And I should also say that most of these have been, I've learned through Drew Bay's Project Kratos, which is a ebook which is focused on bodyweight training. And it's just an excellent directory in there of all the great exercises that are, biomechanically appropriate and safe, which you can do with body weight or very little equipment. And so I've been heavily influenced by the work that Drew's put in there. So workout B is time static contraction, neck extension, and neck flexion. Plank, standard plank movement, static position. Menex lumbar extension for the lower back. Menex leg press, middle setting. Hammer leg extension. Time static contraction, abduction, so abduction, followed by time static contraction, adduction. And I will always do 60 seconds for those. Dumbbell single-legged calf raises. And then I will finish off with the shoulder work, the time static contraction, external rotation, and time static contraction grip. I do grip as much as I can these days, at least once or twice a week, as I think that, and this has been probably mostly influenced by my conversation with Dr. Bryce Lee, who is featured on the podcast. You'll probably recognize his name. And last time we spoke, he was more of an advocate of regular training for grip work. He might have changed his position on that, but that was that sort of inspired me to be doing more grip work, essentially. And in terms of so you can see the workouts there. So it's an upper lower body split. I'm trying to do those once each per week. So it's 2 workouts per week, 1 workout A, 1 workout B. Invariably, there are weeks where I only get one of the workouts in. And so with that said, I may be moving back to doing full body workouts, but doing an A-B routine so that I'm getting a little bit of variety, getting some muscles, more direct stimulus. But then obviously the downside is I struggle personally with a workout that has too many exercises with working to a high level of intensity and getting to muscle failure. So it's something I need to think about. And I typically squeeze these workouts in between clients or before I train clients. And top tip, if you're new to personal training, I would probably suggest that you give a good half-hour buffer between the end of your workout and the next client session. Because I've made the mistake before of being absolutely exhausted from a workout and then going straight into training clients, which is very challenging, especially when you're trying to catch your breath still and you're trying to communicate with the client and give a great experience. It's not ideal. And so with that in mind, if I know I'm a bit crunched for time, I might just do 70% of those workouts. And in some cases, I might be very strapped for time and just do like a big free and throw out the workouts all together and just do like a pulling movement, a pushing movement, and a leg movement if I know I'm not worked out that week, for example. And I know that I'm going to get a huge bang for buck by doing those movements, and sometimes that's what I will do. I think for me, it's going back to what I was saying earlier with regard to my decision to split the workouts up. I also think there might be a recovery issue in play for me. If I do work out too much or too frequently, I've just noticed that it feels to me that I'm not recovering as well between workouts. And I think there's a number of factors in play. I think firstly, just an enormous amount of stress. I've got an 18-month-old son and another baby on the way in October. There's been a lot of relationship-related stress with my partner, obviously a lot of baby-related stress, and then also business. I'm running this studio with my business partner, Sean, but also running high-intensity business and trying to juggle it all and with my fatherhood duties as well and relationship responsibilities. So it's been a massive challenge. I think it's been great. Like, it's been very rewarding, but it's been very challenging. And I've learned a lot during the process. But needless to say, all those stresses really do get to you and they mount up and they accumulate. And for me, it seems to manifest itself and make it difficult for me to recover if I train too frequently. In addition to that, sleep is inconsistent at the moment and a bit all over the place. And that's partly on me. I'm just not going to bed early enough, to be honest with you. And then nutrition. So obviously all of these things have a knock-on effect. If you're very stressed, your food choices aren't going to be as effective, and it's much more tempting to pound some processed food and junk food just to get that short-term dopamine hit. And so occasionally I've been falling off the wagon with nutrition. So there you go. Those are some things that have been affecting my recovery, I believe. And so I'm always cognizant of that and will space my training out accordingly, and that's why a lot of the time I'll only get one workout in the week. Obviously, the downside of that is if I'm just doing the one workout, then I might not be hitting legs for 2 weeks or so. And I do think there is value in doing, making sure that you're stimulating the full body every week if you can. And it's worth mentioning, I've been actually doing yoga once a week. And I know that's going to probably be a shock to a lot of the listeners and the high intensity training community. But I have a friend who started a yoga business. And I just noticed in myself that, and maybe this is the same for a lot of us in high intensity training, that I had really made some judgments about yoga, that there was no value in it, that it was dangerous and redundant in a lot of ways, and I hadn't even really experienced it. I mean, I'd done a tiny bit in the past, but I hadn't really developed an understanding of it. I had judged it through listening to lots of experts in high intensity training and listening to their views. But I think we will have to be careful to judge a training modality before we experience it or truly understand it is the key thing. Maybe that's different for things like CrossFit, where we don't need to do it to see that people are moving really explosively, and a lot of the movements are quite dangerous. And obviously we have the evidence in these forums with tens of thousands of threads regarding injuries. So that might be an exception. There's more like that, but I think there is some value in things like yoga and similar exercise modalities. And just to elaborate on that, I think movement is just really beneficial. I think there are definitely some issues with some yoga practices, at least in my experience. I think the emphasis on trying to develop hypermobility isn't beneficial and probably causes issues in the longer term. I think some of the stretches are not necessary or actually probably increase the likelihood of injury. I don't think it's smart to do a really hard hamstring stretch going into an exercise that's then going to contract the hamstring quite intensely, which is something I've experienced. So I think there's elements like that could be reprogrammed or removed to make it a bit more beneficial. So those are some of the downsides I've experienced, and I'm sure there are others. But one of the upsides for me is there's a lot of like tabletop work where you're in like a push-up position or in a position similar to a push-up, which really seems to have helped with my shoulder issue. I've got a shoulder issue in my right shoulder, possible torn labrum, inflammation in the rotator cuff probably from a basketball injury and some wear and tear. And it's something that plagued me for a long time. And certainly strength training and doing external rotation movements have helped enormously. But I also feel like it just seems to be very coincidental that it's improved significantly whilst I've been doing yoga as well. So it's difficult to, identify causation and correlation, but it seems to me that the yoga might be playing some positive role there. And I think a lot of that is just due to the stability. It might improve in the shoulder from all of the different push-up positions and tabletop positions. And as I said, I think it's a great way to start the day. It's movement. You're moving your body through space. It feels great. And then there's obviously the mindfulness and breathing element to it. And the specific yoga I do, which I can't remember the specific name now, but it's very focused on flowing and breathing and breathing through the nose and being very focused in the moment and this kind of thing. And I find that to be quite calming and quite a nice way to start the day. So yeah, I guess my main takeaway would be don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and discard these practices because some high intensity training expert told you so. I think some are actually worth investigating and trying to understand. And if nothing else, you come away with it, realizing that you were probably already correct and some of these exercises just weren't worth doing at all. And it also really helps you to understand where your clients are coming from, where other people are coming from when they talk about they do yoga or fill in the blank exercise. Now you have a better understanding because you've actually done it. So getting back to my overall kind of exercise routines, I've been walking the dog a lot less since we had a baby and since I've taken on more responsibility. I used to walk the dog 3 to 4 times a week. I used to walk the dog 2 to 3 times per day. And now I walk her 3 to 4 times a week, and my partner walks her as well. So she does get some fair amount of walks in, but not as many as she used to, which is not good for her and not good for my mental health. And so that's something I miss, and it's just difficult to try and get it all in at the moment. But I think I could probably do a better job of making sure I walk the dog more frequently. So that would be like an overview of my overall exercise probably at the moment. I don't play basketball at the minute because still, unfortunately, in a position in Ireland where we can't do indoor sports, I don't think, but that hopefully will change soon. Now, in terms of my results, obviously been through a lot, as I've already outlined, regarding lifestyle changes, but I still do a body composition sort of check-in every Saturday morning. So I use scales, basic scales, weighing scales, and a 3-point caliper test. And I find this helps keep me accountable. And if I know I'm going to be doing that every Saturday morning, I'm typically a little bit more motivated to be more cognizant of what I'm doing and eating during the week. Although that's not always panned out over the last couple of years. So currently weighing in at around 171 pounds, which is pretty heavy for me at 5'11". About 144 pounds of lean mass. Again, take this with a pinch of salt because it's a caliper, so it's not highly accurate. But I measure that every week and have done over years. So it stays pretty much the same. It stayed the same over the past year or so in terms of the lean mass. And my body fat's quite high at the moment. At least for me, it's 15 to 16% body fat. And I've noticed that this will be interesting to some of you. So I've been doing this since about 2018. And I've probably put on it seems based on my measurements that I've put on about 5 to 6 pounds of muscle since then. So that's about a pound a year. And if you remember Skylar Tanner's article, The 6-Year Itch, I think that one of the conclusions from that article is that, if you're strength training over the long term, you can maybe expect about a pound a year. So that sort of aligns quite nicely with that. But prior to all the lifestyle changes, having a baby, taking on more business commitments, I effortlessly maintained 10% body fat for a while. And obviously it's been a lot more challenging since, and I'll be digging into some of that. And there's nothing special in my programming. When I look back at my training over the last 4 years, it's basically once or twice a week, playing around with full body, 2 and 3 way splits, similar to what's explored in Body by Science and Project Kratos and Jürgen Giesing's book, which is called High Intensity Training, something rather, and using their stuff. 2 and 3 way splits, upper and lower body splits. And I've kind of arrived at a conclusion, at least to this point, that, all roads lead to Rome. You're probably sick of me saying that and guess saying that on the podcast. But it would seem to me that the most important thing is just keep doing it. Play around with different protocols. Why not? If they all achieve the same outcome, so be it. But you're not losing anything. And you never know, maybe you'll find certain protocols that work better for you for experimentation, but you're not losing anything probably by doing that. That would be my takeaway on this particular point. So just keep doing it, and everything seems to move in the right direction. And as I was saying, I would say this is the first time in terms of since we've had Arthur, the first time doing intermittent fasting and a carnivore diet for the most part. I did an 80% carnivore diet, that I've struggled with fat loss. And I guess that's mostly down to stress, I've already talked about, which leads to bad eating. But then I sometimes think, is it because I'm a little older? I'm still young, but I'm 34, and what I hear is that as we sort of enter our 30s, we do have to be a little bit more diligent about, our diet and training. And maybe my body is less forgivable now than it was when I was, 28, 29, or in my mid-20s. And when we first had Arthur, and in that first sort of 6 months afterwards, my body fat went up to 18%. And that really made me quite unhappy. And the interesting thing is that when I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to, make some changes here and really dial this in and get this back down to sort of 11, 12%, which is probably where I feel I look my best and I'm probably at my healthiest. And so I started focusing on trying to do that, and then I just found it so difficult. For weeks and weeks and weeks, I was just plateauing or just losing very, very little amount of fat. And I think it's just because of the stress that was really continuous, and then there'd be the odd snack here and there, which would just probably derail me a bit. So that's been fascinating to learn that. And what I've done recently to try and turn that around, and as I said, I'm sort of sitting around 15-16%, so I am getting results and I am moving in the right direction, is just really cutting out evening carbohydrate and just really focusing on high protein, high fat. So lots of eggs and steaks, avocados, just really satiating whole food. And I'm not saying that low carb is magic or anything like that, but I just noticed for me, when I started cutting out some of those carbohydrates in the evening, whether it's less calories or better signaling or what have you, it just seems to get me the results I'm looking for. So I'm just going to stick with that, and I'm sure my body fat percentage will fall down to the level it should be. And we have a second baby arriving in October. And so my goal was to get into the best shape possible for the new arrival. So I had a bit of a buffer, which is probably a bit foolish, because even if you have a buffer, it's so easy to gain weight fast. Oh my God. Like, at least for me, if I eat badly for a couple of weeks, I just put on so much weight. And so I have to be really vigilant with that, at least now. And so I don't know whether this is a bit of a silly goal, but I'm doing it anyway. And so my goal is to, due date sort of late October, and so I'm focused on trying to get into my best shape for that point. I wonder, some of you perhaps might listen to this and think, Lawrence, why do you do this to yourself? And obviously, we all know why we have families, because they're a wonderful thing. But the question could be asked, why are you doing this with the businesses? It's interesting. When I am just running the online business, high intensity business, it's a very, well, it's not easy, but it's an easier business to run because it's online, it's more leveraged. Whereas a training studio, you have to be there, you have to deliver the sessions until obviously we hire the individuals to do some of those sessions as well. And so it's a lot to take on, especially when we got kids. And, there's definitely been moments where it's like, was this the best thing to do? But I'm just so passionate about this, and I just love doing it. And I'm really passionate about achieving this vision that we've got for both businesses, that there's just no way I won't be doing both. And there's such a strong symbiotic relationship between the two businesses, because obviously I can, record my progress with the studio on the podcast. And then I can also use all the content from the website, the podcast, and from Hit Business membership, and to actually grow the studio. So I have this enormous advantage and all these resources, and they all sort of feed into each other. And so it's a kind of a no-brainer from that perspective. So I hope you found that interesting. And that's just a little update on me in terms of training and diet and business focus. And I'll just give you some takeaways, some things that I think will help you and have helped me get through some of these more stressful periods of life, and whilst looking after your health and performance as much as you can. So I think one of the first things to think about regarding training is when you're taking on a lot in your life, and this is, again, I'm going to hat tip Bryce Lee for this, because he did this tweet which really resonated with me. And that is to focus on intensity over volume of your workouts. Now, most of us probably agree that intensity and training to muscle failure is probably the most important variable in your workout. So if you're really struggling with energy and recovery because of a stressful lifestyle, or you're just really, really time crunched, then focus on intensity over volume. Pick big multi-joint movements that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. And really focus on training those to absolute muscle failure, and go for that over lots of exercise and more volume. Then I would really pay attention to the recovery side of the equation. I did a wonderful podcast recently with Doug McGuff. It's the most recent episode with Doug, which we'll link to in the show notes, where we talked about recovery a lot, and just really highlight again the importance of focusing on your recovery. So that means making sure you're really hydrated, making sure that you're looking after your sleep, that you've got good sleep hygiene, that you're going to bed and waking up at the same time every day if you can. It's tempting, right? When you have kids, evenings are very precious because they're your time to spend with your spouse, to wind down, to relax, or maybe get something done. And so it takes a little bit more discipline to say, you know, I'm going to go to bed at this time. I'm going to sit in bed and read a book and make sure I'm, asleep before 10 or 10:30 or whatever it is. But it's so beneficial for recovery, and you'll just feel so much better the next day. And then just make sure that you are, making time for doing things that relieve stress, like exercising and being out in nature and going for walks and meditating and doing movement and other forms of exercise, and protect that time and schedule it in advance. Because if you're similar to me, then when you have spare time, it can often just default to work rather than doing something that's actually really going to add value to your health, and ultimately your performance, because you need this to renew yourself. And in terms of bringing it to business and work, I think the trick when you've got a lot going on is just don't get caught in busyness mode, where you're just not discriminating between tasks and just doing whatever's easiest or whatever is right in your face. Like, a tempting example of that would be just checking email and processing email when that email might have nothing to do with the most important rocks or priorities in your business or work. So identifying those first, identify what's the most important, what's going to move the needle in your business, in your work. What are those tasks when done will make everything easier or unimportant? That's quite a good question to ask yourself. And then just make sure that you're blocking out your mornings, ideally 2 to 3 hours, to actually focus on those big tasks. Now, I'm a big fan of the Maker Manager schedule, which is, I forget the author of the article. I think it's Paul Graham, I want to say. He's a famous investor behind Y Combinator and other things. And he talked about Maker Manager. I believe I'm attributing that right. And the Maker Manager schedule is just quite self-explanatory. It's Maker in the morning, so using your best hours for cognitive focus on those most important and probably most cognitively demanding tasks. And making sure that you're doing one at a time, you're not multitasking, and you're really single focused on one thing for 2 to 3 hours. And look, if you're really, really busy, and like I said, if you're going through a tough spot in life, like even 1 hour of focus is good. And then use the evenings to manage, make sure all the trains turn up on time, and make sure you get back to people on time, and check email and process email and do admin, those kinds of things. So I find that sort of schedule arrangement works really well for me. And so there's a structure for you to test in your own life. And last thing I'll say is just make sure that you're making time for family and friends and for you. And I've got you in all caps here in front of me in my notes, because it's so easy to neglect that. And maybe you think that work is for you, but it's not. And you need to make sure that you have an identity outside of work, that there's other things that you do. So that when work's not always going well, which it won't always, and same for business, that you need to have your identity divested a little bit, so that you're not just defined by your work. And so it helps, I guess, get through some of the more challenging times and just give you more fun in your life. And I would make sure you schedule that. Again, if you don't schedule it, it really won't happen. And think about, what is it that you enjoy to do? What is it that brings you a lot of joy, which you perhaps neglect or have neglected? And it could be something really small. It could be, just having a meal and watching Friends on Netflix for an hour because you love Friends. I don't know. But just having a discipline around where you actually schedule that a week ahead. And maybe it's watching your favorite sports team or something like that. And then protect that time. But that time is more important than a client. That time should not be overwritten with a business commitment or something else. You should protect it, because you need that to perform at your best. You need to have that time for you so you can renew yourself and then perform really well. Otherwise, if you're always grinding it out, your performance will suffer, and so will your mental health probably as well. So that's it. Hopefully you found those takeaways useful in terms of, helping you get through stressful periods of your life and ultimately maximize health and performance, or not maximize, but optimize where you can, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so hopefully those have been helpful. And as I said, I'm really excited to grow the strength training studio we have called Optima Strength. Website coming very soon. And my unfair advantage is that I have HIT Business membership, which provides how-to guides from successful strength training studio owners so you can start growing your business with confidence. And we have community and we have amazing content from companies like Discover Strength on how to grow your business, which is not available anywhere else. And so that's been a huge advantage to me. I'm in there every day using the checklists, the resources, the content to help me in my business. And we're growing fast. We're acquiring customers every week thanks to that resource. And if you're interested in joining Hit Business Membership and experiencing the same benefits, then please go to highintensitybusiness.com/join to learn about all the details and join there as well. So hopefully you found this podcast helpful. It's relatively short today. Just really wanted to give you an update on all those things. And if you're interested in finding the blog post for this particular episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 331. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.